In the World Conservation and Exhibition Centre, conservators, curators and collection managers are working to ready objects for the latest exhibition, Peru, A Journey in Time. The exhibition includes a large number of organic objects dating back as far as 100 BC. Organic objects are made of natural materials such as wood, leather, bone and textiles, and because of the fragile nature of many of these objects, careful consideration is given to the way they will be displayed in the exhibition.
For me, a mount is really an extension of the conservation treatment because you're making something that's going to give full support to an object, and it can actually reduce the amount of interventive treatment an object needs if you know it's going to have a really good supportive mount at the end of it. So when I'm thinking about making a mount, I'm designing my mount based on the condition of the object. So if an object is quite robust, it obviously needs less support, and so my mount can give minimal support to the object. But if I'm trying to mount something that is weaker in certain areas or is taking too much weight in certain areas, I'll design my mount to specifically support those areas. They're a really important part of the conservation process. And beside me is this beautiful feather headdress from the Andes, from what is now Peru. It's been dated to the Chimú-Inca period, so somewhere from between the 1470s to the 1530s. And one of the things I find so interesting about this object is the combination of materials. You've got a fabric base, it's a woven fabric made from cotton, cotton being very much a fiber you would have found in the coastal regions. And onto it, you've got a whole bunch of different feathers that would have most likely come from the Amazon. So you've got two different materials separated by hundreds of kilometers across really difficult terrain, which just shows how important the choice of materials were. The other thing I love about this feather headdress is the way they've used the feathers to get different visual effects. So on the hanging panels here, they've bundled the feathers together and cut them quite short so they all lie flat, and in that way get these really crisp, colorful geometric designs. Whereas on the top, they've obviously kept the long shaft, and not only that, they've extended the shaft by tying on another feather shaft to it. So this extension was very much intentional, and I think it must have been to exaggerate the sort of soft bobbing or flapping when the wearer moved around. So I like to think it was quite bird-like during a ceremonial performance. So the headdress itself has been treated by my colleague Sophie Rode. She's stabilized all the feathers and supported any splits in the shafts and ensured that the cotton base itself doesn't have large areas of loss or weaker areas that would have needed support. I've been tasked with making the display mount, and we're trying to go for the most discreet display mount possible, showing the feather headdress as worn, so as you'd see it now. The first thing I'm going to think about when I'm looking at the headdress is I'm also going to look at condition. So I'm going to look at the cotton, and I'm going to, again, make sure there's no splits or tears or areas of loss. But I'm also going to look for signs of how the headdress may have been worn. Whenever I'm thinking about a garment, I'm thinking about how it would have sat on the body. So in this case, how it would have sat on the head. Would it have been cocked back against the back of the head? How far does the rim come down the forehead? Those kind of questions. I think in this case, there's a lot of clues. So first off, there are actually ties, and it's lovely that the ties are actually padded all the way down to where they would have touched your chin bone, and then they haven't padded the rest where you actually would have tied under your chin. You've also got the clues that you've got hanging panels, and so I think this is a fairly straightforward case that the headdress would have sat fairly square on the head, because that would have been the best shape to show off all the geometric shapes on the panels. I think one of the questions is just whether these panels are secure enough to withstand their own weight during the length of the exhibition. So that's something I'll assess, whether they need more support. And obviously, because we have a flexible hat, that whole hat will need support. So I'll be thinking about how to make an internal shape for that hat. When the headdress came into the studio, it was on its storage mount, which was supporting not only the hat, but it also supported the vertical panels. But because that storage mount was going to be a great former for me to build my buckram mount on, I've removed the headdress onto this temporary mount. But doing that is also giving me an opportunity to see how the hanging panels actually sit without any support, and whether I need to change the shape of my mount through padding to possibly change how they hang, maybe kick out the back panel a little bit more or bring in the side panels, and also whether they do need a bit of support and whether I need to adjust my mount to have something discreet come down and actually provide a little bit of nap for those panels to sit on. Okay, so now I'm going to build the base of my mount, and this is going to be made out of quite an open weave linen, and I'm using wheat starch as well, and these materials are obviously conservation grade. We know how they age and they won't damage the object, even if it is just a display mount. So this is essentially paper mache for grown-ups, and this is one of my most favorite processes to do, because you don't need to be really precise. You can be fun and messy, and you can go back in and change things. So there's lots of room for play and error. So this is going to harden into quite a firm mount. So the next stage of my mount is to be able to get the final shape. So I need to get the feather headdress onto this mount, which is one I made earlier and is completely dry and is actually hardened into a really nice supportive mount. However, it's too rough to get that headdress on here, so I'm going to just temporarily pad it out and put a really slippy fabric on the top, like silk or Tyvek, and I'll transfer the headdress onto this mount and literally be able to draw or stitch a line where the rim of the hat comes to, and that way cut away the excess so you can't see it on display. To see the headdress and the mount that it sits on, check out our latest exhibition, Peru, A Journey in Time.